Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Come in, don't stand around. I'm Simon Tells Tales, and this is the second in my 5-part series of videos looking at TSR's 1991 publication, Anauroch, by Ed Greenwood. In the first video, I took you on a tour of the geography of Anauroch, visiting the high ice, the plain of stones, and the sword. But in this video, I want to talk to you about its three major factions: the Bedine, the Zhentarim, and the Phaerun. Later videos will talk about the region's minor factions as well, before I give you an overall review of the campaign setting, and then leave you with 5 great story hooks to use in your campaigns. So, where do we begin? Ladies and gentlemen, let us return to Anauroch and the desert plain of the sword, where the sun beats down on us and sand dunes fold in on themselves, heat rising, causing the air to shimmer and shift in the wind. We hear, even now, the faint sounds of metal and footsteps, and looking up on the horizon, we see a group of travellers making their way across the desert while vultures circle overhead. Come with me, and we will step closer as the travellers move on, taking camels between them. You might be forgiven if, in this instance, you mistook those travellers for one of the Bedine tribes that are native to these regions. However, the sunburned skin that shows through the desert clothes betray them, as does the nervous glances with which they look around themselves. These are not Bedine nomads. Instead, these are Zhentarim agents who, at this time in Faerun's history, are trying to establish a stable trade route from the Moonsea and overland towards the cities of Neverwinter and Waterdeep. Dragons, orcs, and other enemies have forced the Zhentarim across these desert wastes in a desperate attempt to establish a trade route that will allow them to bring in the income that's required to finance their fiendish plots. But the desert comes with its own challenges, and the Zhentarim are not satisfied with simply establishing a trade route. No, they need to control this desert land in order to safeguard their profits. Walk with me a while as we watch the Zhentarim continue their travels. We listen to the rattle of their caravan and their flasks of their water. It's a rhythmical, lulling sound, but if you break away from it, then in the not so distant area in front of us, we can catch sight of leaves of dark green breaking through the desert. You might be forgiven for mistaking this small outcrop as a mirage, but the Zhentarim caravan heads right for it now, and as it does, the vultures overhead swoop towards it faster and closer until they reach the ground. Let us stand with those vultures among this oasis of dark green. As we stand, black-robed men and women emerge from the shadows between the trees, and the vulture transforms to take on the shape of Zhentarim agents. Gestures and passwords are quickly exchanged, and then greetings. As the caravan approaches, the transformed vultures drink from the water in the centre of the oasis, but look closer at that water. It is true that the desert holds many wonderful marvels, and oases are one of them, but this is no ordinary oasis. Pitched at its centre is a jar of endless water. See now how the water flows out from it, dripping into the earth, filling the area all around the oasis with rich nutrients that cause the trees to flourish and grow. A true visionary might see this as a way to overturn the desert ruin that was imposed by the Phaerun, but the Zhentarim are too preoccupied with their fiendish plots to consider any wider transformative acts. In fact, we can see now the true nature of the Zhentarim, and if you come with me across the twisting desert dunes of the sword, stepping around columns of stone and veiled by winds, hinting at the ruins that lie below, then, across the desert sands, we can find ourselves in amongst an encampment of tents. On the camp's outskirts and by the dunes, armed men stand guard and camels rest in the shade. There's a quiet stillness to this place, and the hands of the men rest on the hilts of their scimitars. This is a camp for one of the nomadic Bedine tribes. Outside the tribe's central tent, armed guards stand at the ready, but we will slip past them and duck beneath the folds of the tent flaps to slip amongst the rugs and drapes and incense. There we can see the sheikh of the tribe, seated with representatives of the Zhentarim opposite. The dark-robed wizards of the Zhentarim offer the sheikh a gift of friendship, a scimitar expertly crafted by dwarves and then enchanted with Zhentarim magic so that it will bring the wielder great strength. But one should beware of the gifts of wizards. And unbeknownst to the sheikh, the scimitar has been imbued with spells that will allow the wielder to fall bit by bit under the control of the Zhentarim. We will not stay here watching the scene for long enough to see if the sheikh accepts the barbed gifts of the Black Road wizards. Instead, we will move outside and over the sands, passing over the shifting deserts, through sunburned plateaus, and over ravines carved out by rock, until we reach another campsite. Here, no one stands guard, and there are no camels tied to stakes. The flags of tents flutter in the winds, unhooked and torn free as sand drifts into the encampment. The contents of the tents, pots, chests and flasks, litter the ground. Some of these contents are broken, some are stained with blood, and the patches of blood grow, soaking the sand as we step through the encampment, discovering the bodies of fallen Bedine soldiers, their bodies torn and ripped apart, feasted upon. This is what becomes of those who will not side with the Zhentarim, those who will not be tools in their plans. The black-robed wizards call upon their allies, the half-man, half-lizard Laertis tribes that emerge from rocky caverns and crevices in the desert at night to launch midnight raids upon the enemies of the Zhentarim and to feast on the bodies of their foes. For now, there is no single leader or tribe that unites the Bedine, no banner under whose leadership they might come together. Occasionally in the past, a threat has been significant enough for the tribes to come together under a single oversheikh, but the alliances are never lasting. Perhaps soon, though, with the rise of the Zhentarim, that might change. But not everyone in the desert is concerned with the control of the trade routes and pathways over the sand. Here and there, hidden from the dunes and usually guarded by tough bands of mercenaries, see the archaeological excavations that have been set up in the desert, or the probing shafts of mines that have been cut in the outcrops of rock. These are the expeditions, sometimes from patrons of Waterdeep or Cormyr, sometimes from red wizards of thre, sometimes from dwarven mining clans, who have come to the sword to dig for seams of rich ore or lost magics in amongst ancient Netherese ruins. Even now, exploratory shafts are tunnelling deep down into the cool caverns of rock and stone that are below the desert. Here, the shouts of excavation supervisors, excited to see what is below. They step forth with swagger and abandon into these depths. So let us proceed with them. Let us sink down now between layers of rock, further than the expedition teams will spread towards what waits beneath. Something is waking up deep in the rocks and amongst the Anauroch underdark beneath the desert. There, lit by lichen and dark glowing crystals, are beholders whose eyes swivel towards the sound of the vibrations in the earth. Because of the giant size of the beholder's eyes, we can see that something is wrong with its central eye. It doesn't have the same level of keen perception that we'd expect to see in a normal beholder. Something is missing, something is wrong, something is controlling it. So pass with me now, through tunnels and caverns shaped by the eye rays of beholders, and finally we shall find what we seek, the source of the control over the beholders, the ancient conical race of the Phaerym, the creatures who created this dark desert, trapped now by ancient magics in this layer of Underdark, but able to manipulate and enslave creatures who come close enough to them that they can place them under their spell. In the dark, their teeth glisten, row upon row of fangs descending down their conical shafts, the claws of their hands reaching up together as they anticipate the descent of the expedition that even now reaches down towards them. They sense the approach of new thralls that they can place under their spell as they work on a plan to release them from their millennia-old prison beneath the sands. Thank you. I'm Simon Tells Tales, and this has been the second in my 5-part series looking at TSR's 1991 campaign setting, Anauroch by Ed Greenwood. When we meet again, we'll be looking at some of the lesser factions at play within this desert land. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button below and subscribe for more videos exploring some of the classic Forgotten Realms D&D settings. If you've got a favourite out there as well that you'd love me to cover, please let me know in the comments below. And until then, I will bid you a good night and see you next time when we meet the remaining factions of the desert.